But yeah, I mean, for context, folks, streetwalkers in Singapore are technically illegal. Not technically, yeah, they're literally
literally illegal. Yes. What is allowed is the houses.
Yes. So you have the lorongs, which have the brothels, which are called fish tanks.
Fish tanks.
Yeah, because they have glass panes. So
it better not be the smell. Smells fishy.
Wow. I was not expecting that.
Sorry.
Hello, Internet, and welcome to Living It Up in Lion City, a podcast about life in Singapore, where friends and I talk about what goes on in this little red dot we call home. My name is Rindo, and this episode we're going to talk about living it up in the famous neighbourhood of Geylang, or infamous neighbourhood, depending who you talk to. It has gained quite the reputation for being the red light district of Singapore, and not exactly aligned with the general perception of orderliness that Singapore is known for. But is that all there is to it? This episode, I chat with my friends and fellow residents of Geylang, Jasmine from episode 15 of this podcast, Shankar from episode 17, and Fifi, who is Singaporean and keen, as are we all, to share what it's really like to live in Geylang. Enjoy the episode, folks! How long have you guys been living here in Geylang?
For me, it's been, I think, about 2 years now that I've been living in Geylang. Love it.
For me, it was, I think it's 3 years and a half. And still counting.
Probably my entire life, over 20 years.
So I've only been here for about 6 months now, but I have been in and out of Geylang multiple times, and let's get to it. Now, so I have here a presentation about the history of Geylang.
Appreciate you preparing that.
It is a lot of effort.
What you're seeing here is actually what Geylang used to look like in the 1840s. Because that's when Geylang was founded, so to speak.
So it was very, very close to the sea.
Yes,
all the rest is...
So this was before the reclamation and all that.
Reclamation land,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. So the story goes that, the original settlers of Geylang were the Malay and the Orang Laut folk. Mm-hmm. And they were actually chilling out by the Singapore River, which is now like Boat Quay and all that, right? And then the British came along and they were like, yo, we need to build our colonial bullshit, get the fuck out. Either help us or get the fuck out, right? And then the Malay and the Orang Laut guys were like, yeah, okay, all right, we don't want to work for you, so we're going to get the fuck out. Just don't call us lazy 200 years later and all that shit. And they moved east to Kallang River, which is where the stadium is right now. And they used to have houses like these, which are like houses built on stilts, which is right next to, the river and stuff. And that's how Geylang came to be. So they called it Geylang Kelapa, and it was named after a particular plant called Geylang. And that's how...
Oh, really?
It's a plant name?
It's a plant name, yeah.
That is so cool. I had no idea.
So as it turns out, a lot of places in Singapore are actually named after the plants and the vegetation that grows in the region.
Wow.
So it was mostly like, residential areas, agriculture, farming, lots of green. It was very, very cool and all. It was only towards the 1900s that it started, urbanizing, because, the population of Singapore was increasing like tenfold. And so what happened was that since the British came along, they wanted to build lots of stuff. So they brought in like tons of people to work and build roads and buildings and all that stuff, right? So this included people from China, from other parts of the region, from India. And the thing was, so a lot of people just eventually ended up in Geylang. So this was like the OG multicultural neighborhood. And the Geylang Road that you're seeing right now was one of the first roads built in Singapore from the 1840s. And at the time, like around the 1870s or something, there was a tram line that used to go from the city all the way to the east. A tram. Yeah, there was a tram.
Oh, I didn't know that was tram in Singapore.
Yeah. So then the tram started, and then radiating from the tram, different streets started emerging, and that's what eventually we call the Lorongs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What
So-
means Lorong actually?
Lorong means street.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's just path. So, after the 1900s, urbanization was going on at a rapid pace. And especially after World War II, it just exploded. People were coming in from all over the place. They were overwhelmingly men because they were working in construction and all those, nation building activities. And around this time, Geylang also became an entertainment center, like gambling and sports and all sorts of stuff. One of the highlights of Geylang during that time was a place called the Gay World Entertainment Park,
Yeah.
which was like the ultimate entertainment hub. Like sports, karaoke, ballroom dancing. All
Is that the
stuff.
one still near Kallang?
There is one there.
Yeah, there's
It's
something
still
still
called
called Geylang.
Gay World.
Sorry, there's
Gay
something
World,
still called
yeah.
Gay World.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's related to that because they said that Gay World kind of shut down in the 1960s. But I'm guessing that place is kind of like a throwback.
I think that right now is
Yeah,
some
like-
kind of
yeah.
a hostel.
Yeah, so it's like,
Something like
it's,
that.
it's something that you see, right? It's a Gay World Hotel, I think, right?
Yeah.
Gay World Hotel. Yeah. So that is pretty much the story of Geylang. Now, there is something even more interesting about Geylang in terms of history. The race riots started here in Geylang, in Lorong 14, actually.
Is that the first race riot we had?
Yeah, the one in 21st July 1964. So, for context, Singapore became part of Malaysia in 1963, and it was very contentious from the get-go because Malaysia had a different style of governance that Singapore wasn't cool with. Malaysia was all about ruling along, communal and religious lines, whereas Singapore was all about, all races, all religions, equality, and all that stuff.
Right.
So there was like a lot of tensions, and tensions were growing very high in that period of time. So there was a Muslim festival that was happening in the Padang, and there's a procession from the Padang along Victoria Road and coming towards Geylang. And in Lorong 14, there was a scuffle that broke out between some Malay folk and some Chinese folk, and shit went down. Like this, just a riot broke out, the likes of which like Singapore had never seen before. Like 4 people died, 178 people were injured, close to 20 houses were burned to the ground. And the police had to step in, the military had to step in. They imposed curfew, they arrested like a ton of people, and this went on for 2 fucking weeks. Only after 2 weeks did it subside, and everybody was like, okay, cool, this happened, let's move on, things are okay now, it's fine. Until 2 months later, on 2nd September, when there was a mysterious death of a Malay trishaw rider, and it was widely attributed to some Chinese people, and that instigated riot again. This time, 13 people died. And the police and military came in once again, and they arrested, close to 1,500 people. And then, they were like, yep, you know what? Fuck this shit. This is not working out. And then they decided to, and among a lot of other reasons, Singapore and Malaysia decided to split, right? And Singapore was like, yeah, we never want this to happen again. We never want any tension along race or religion. And so a lot of the policies that we see here in Singapore right now is actually because of those seminal events. This was actually the cornerstone of what Singaporean society is now, because they never want to have a repeat of that right now, ever again. Unfortunately, it happened again in 1969. This was because of the riots that happened in Kuala Lumpur in 13th May, which was their version of the race riots in Malaysia, and that spilled over to Singapore. This time, the Singaporean police were a little more prepared, so they were like, okay, they clamped it down. But then it also kind of showed that all it takes is one match to be lit for shit to go down. So ever since then, Singapore has constantly actively enforced a policy of equality across races, across religions, and anything that would shake that balance will be clamped down on. No questions asked. They'll be like, we're going to shut that shit down.
So it's because of Geylang. A lot of these
as
policies.
it turns out, yeah. Fifi, I wanted to ask, was this covered in your history books?
No, we mentioned like the racial riots, but it wasn't like where it took place, and where it spilled over from, like from where we were with Malaysia and all that. So not a lot was covered.
Okay.
But it was more of like, okay, we had a brief history, and then they talked about just briefly why it happened, and then we moved on from there. This is interesting because even for myself, I didn't know all this happened in Geylang, and like why it stemmed from like all these riots. It's really interesting. So even if my entire life I've been living in Geylang, but I didn't know. I guess I'm in the more peaceful part of Geylang, where Geylang Serai is. So like I'm not as familiar as like what literally happened, like the more red light district area.
Okay.
So perhaps that, yeah.
Well, so it's like Geylang Serai is also part of Geylang. Like in the 1940s, when everybody like started moving into Geylang, Geylang Serai was also part of it. So Geylang Kelapa included like where we are right now, and Geylang Serai, which is like the Juchat area and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And essentially, there is the Geylang River that you see down here. So that separated the Malay community. So it's like east of the Geylang River is predominantly the Malay community, and west of it was predominantly the Chinese community. It wasn't like a hard boundary. Like people were from all over the place. For example, like the Indian community was like all over the place. And Geylang in general came to be known as a place of commerce. So I was reading this one research paper that talked of Geylang as the OG Orchard Road, where people from Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia would come down to these areas, for vegetables, for shopping, for all sorts of things. And that was the reason why the tram was installed, because they couldn't handle the amount of traffic coming in to do the shopping and stuff like that.
Wow.
And so it was like a huge center of commerce. So back in the day, the colonial center was, in what we now call downtown, but like the real center of trade was here in Geylang, right? I want to talk about the sin of Geylang, right? Now,
Let's get down to business.
there we go. So Singapore, since 1819, started off as a colonial port, right? As with all colonial ports, prostitution started from day one. We're talking about a trade port with sailors coming in, construction workers coming in from all parts of the region, building stuff and all that. And at the time, 80% of the population of Singapore were men. And so, of course, in order to satisfy their needs, there are a lot of lonely people. Boatloads of women were shipped from different places, first by choice and then not by choice anymore. There was a lot of trafficking. As it turns out, from the 1840s till the 1890s, Japanese women were trafficked to Singapore a lot. They were called karaoke-san. And it seemed that they were like smuggled from Japan to different parts of Asia, and Singapore was like one of those ports. And the prostitution was actually very common in what is now Chinatown and downtown areas all the way till Bugis, because that entire stretch was, harbor.
So it's not even in Geylang.
It didn't start there. It wasn't in Geylang.
Wow.
Right?
I think that Tanjung Pagar as well.
Yeah, Tanjung Pagar, like
very
all those places, right? So this is like where all the prostitution is going on. And with prostitution, gambling became like a big thing. There was also the issue with opium, which turned out to be a big social scourge in Singapore in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And over time, the British colonial government, they tried to clamp down on it. First, they were like, yeah, you know what? It's a colonial port. Men need to fuck. And so they just kind of let it go. But then it became a bit of an issue. So they tried to clamp down just parts of it. So in 1917, the British government banned prostitution if the women are white. So white women, if there's any prostitution going on with white women, for example, they were rescued. The others were just kind of like, yeah, they don't care. So and so that it was allowed to continue.
There goes my career.
If you were living in the past.
Yeah. So
That's fucked up.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
that's fucked up.
it was the nature of how things worked at the time. Yeah, this is kind of spread across any colonial nation. So yeah, that used to go on, and so over time, what then happened was that it all came to a peak in the 1940s and 1950s when sex was commoditized. Like in order to get business, you had to sex it up. And so even something as traditional as Getai dances, which is something that we see in the neighborhoods all the time. So Getai dances are like, women singing and dancing, and there's like people hanging around, eating and drinking and having a good time. It started getting increasingly more sexualized. And so it got to a point where all the Getai dancers started going, yeah, you know what, we need to bring the crowds in. So let's strip tease.
Oh.
And so they started taking their clothes off and getting all very, very risque. And this was cause for a lot of public outcry in the 1950s. And so the Singaporeans were like, well, fuck this, man. Way to corrupt like a traditional thing going on. And because of all this public outcry, what was then a very new party called the People's Action Party promised the people that if you elect us over the British, we will clean up the streets. We will remove all
The
these
house.
yeah. I mean, so at the time, it was still under the British rule, but they were given some level of self-governance. So the PAP was like, yo, let's remove all these Western corrupt influences. The strip teasing, the gambling, the all that, the bar dancing, the long hair and all that shit. So this culture of debauchery, so to speak, was called yellow culture. So the party at the time, when they won the elections in 1959, they were like, yo, we're going to clean up this yellow culture. We're going to remove all traces of it because we want to decolonize ourselves. Because let's remember, Singapore in the 1950s fucking hated the British. So they were like, yo, this British influence is just fucking our society up. So let's clean it up. Let's clean up this yellow culture. Let's just remove all traces of it. And let's bring back our unified Malayan culture to the fore. So this included cleaning up prostitution. This included cleaning up all the gambling dens, shutting down all the opium shit that was going on. And they started with Tanjung Pagar. And so they cleaned up everything close to the major ports and all that. And because of that, prostitution was never going to stop. So they moved eastward. So they were like, then they started going towards, Bugis, right? And the government and the authorities constantly try to, push them out of the city. And for the longest time, from the 1950s till the 1980s, they managed to wipe out all trace of, sin and debauchery in Bugis. In the end, most of those folks ended up in Geylang.
Okay.
And then in the 1980s, the government was like, okay, all right. If we stamp it out completely, it's going to be a problem because it's going to stop popping up in different places. So then they were like, okay, you know what? Let's just
Contain it in Geylang.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's leave it in the gay world.
So if we continue pushing it to the east, it might go away. Is that what you're trying to say?
They have like a hub where they can leave it, where it's happening, but it's one place and it's not bothering them because it's not downtown.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The context around Singaporean society at the time was that they were rapidly building up as a nation. They were allocating all these spaces for residential areas. They were moving people from the campus.
So you can have your polished corner,
Yeah.
you can represent yourself, but then you have your sin in Geylang.
Yeah, so they were like, yeah, you know what? Okay, let's just leave this be. People will still need to do what they want to do. But let's just focus on the other stuff first, right? So, and that's what that's been ever since.
What people need to do, can I just say it? It's like, you poor man, you gotta jerk off all the time. It's tough life. All these needs, right? Tough life.
They've got nothing to say.
Yeah, there's nothing to say.
I mean, it was an interesting time. Even before Geylang, while it was being, while it was migrating from downtown towards Geylang, there were some very, very interesting people who were a big part of the scene. Apparently, there was this lady from China who since renamed herself as Fanny. Like she was like smuggled into the country. She was like gang raped. She was thrown out in the street, but then she was taken in by, like a mama son, so to speak. And, she then, rose up the ranks, became like a brothel owner herself. And then she did something that nobody else did. She created a floating brothel, essentially a bunch of boats with hookers from all over the region. And
entrepreneurial shit right there.
At Geylang River?
well, along Singapore River, I think.
Wow.
And it was very popular, among sailors, among people who want to do bachelor parties.
Don't need to go to land anymore. Just dock.
So like the traditional boat is called a junk, right? So she had this big junk with all these people, and the boat was.
Would you junk on the junk?
Sorry.
it was literally called Fanny's Junk.
Oh, I love it. Fanny sounds like a good
Yeah. So yeah, those were like interesting times going on. There was a point in time in the 1950s, especially after the striptease thing that was going on among ghetto dancers, that a lot of people criticized Singapore as being a giant brothel and nothing more. And that's what kind of triggered like the government to go, hey, you know what, we gotta clean this.
Oh, that's the slogan for Geylang. Great.
Funny thing is, we never learned it in Singapore. Like in those books, it's not really a part of history that we covered.
But
So-
I mean, we feel like, are they really going to talk about Fanny's junk? You know?
In
Could
class.
have mentioned it.
So I thought all of that was very interesting because it just gives some context as to what Geylang is about versus what I used to know about when I first moved to Singapore. For me, Geylang was like, oh, the den of sin.
Yeah, the wild red light district. I remember when I moved here, I was in a cab looking to view apartments, and the taxi driver, I told him I'm going to Geylang, and he turns around, he's like, ma'am, why would you go to Geylang? And I'm like, I'm looking at apartments. Oh my God, you moved there? And I'm like, what? It's fine. They'd make it sound like you get shot every 5 minutes or so. And I was like, no, it's fine. And then he told me all this story, and he told me how all the sailors were actually a lot of the prostitution was very centered around boogies. And I was like, oh, okay. Everyone just kind of thinks it's Geylang. So I think it's really important actually to tell people, it was everywhere. It's in the corner. It's the biggest business that, brings all the men together. And
What brings all the boys to the yard?
yeah. Or on the boat. But then it got pushed into that area because I've also always just thought of Geylang to be the red light district area. And I think it's become so much more. It's like the food hub and all that stuff. And again, as someone who's an expat in Singapore, is still for me the safest spot. Like,
Yeah.
I could be the drunkest I can possibly be, and I still feel super comfortable in the middle of the night.
There's a lot of prejudice actually
Yeah.
about this.
Yes, I think so too.
Like what kind of prejudice?
I think a lot of people, if you say that you live in Geylang, they think that you are just hooking up with girls every day.
I mean,
Given
if you're a middle-aged white dude living in Geylang, yeah.
If I'm, yeah, you are
Why else are you here, man?
You were asking for it.
and I'm more living in Geylang. Everyone thinks that's the rule, that I just go there and I don't have to work. I just have fun every day with typical girls from the area. And I think it's a prejudice anyway. I live in a very, very, very central part of Geylang, Lorong 18. And I have a balcony that looks out. So actually, I think it's a bit unfair because I also said this. All the guys that you see approaching the girls usually are Chinese, Singaporean, Indian, Pakistani. Sometimes you see some Angmo, drunk, old one. Sometimes the Angmos that you see them with a backpack because this is a backpack area. This is kind of backpack friendly. Prices are quite affordable, and there is still quite this part of the going there for the food.
Yeah.
So, but if you, for example, look there at night, 2 a.m. when you arrive home, have a look outside. Mostly it's a lot of times it's Chinese, Singaporean, Indian, Pakistani, Malay.
Yeah.
Malay, not that many, but sometimes yeah.
Well, so as it turns out, Geylang is also a place where a lot of the construction worker dormitories are.
Yes.
So this has been the case since 1997. a lot of construction worker dormitories were built. A lot of people started coming in, and the same thing in the 1800s. Where there's like a ton of men, and so prostitution follows that.
Some taxi drivers, some construction workers,
So,
people that
Fifi-
works in other food carts.
Yeah. So Fifi, as a Singaporean who's lived in Geylang, tell us like what your experience is.
Well, it's almost the same as Shankao's, as in the part about the prejudice.
She's just here to hook up.
No, like my parents, or there are some people who would even warn us about, like, when you go to Geylang, don't wear so, and just be aware of what you're wearing. Don't go too near to those like the KTVs and the shady areas. So even Singaporeans are prejudiced against their own area, these places. So it's actually quite it's not surprising why foreigners think that way of Geylang, because even the Singaporeans themselves don't think that Geylang is a clean area.
Yeah.
So and when you talk about Geylang, people think about the red light district, and that's it. They don't think about Geylang Serai.
Yeah.
So
Right.
like there's only one identity, basically red light district, and then full stop. Which is quite sad, because Geylang is basically made
It's
out of
bigger
two
than
different
that, yeah.
areas, bigger than that.
Yeah.
And they're two very different areas. And even in the red light district area, you have all this food. There's amazing places to visit in Geylang. I mean, food places.
I think it's quite a community, because we all get that shit. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a white man or you're local, or we all get that type of shit of, oh my god, you live in Geylang, or what you doing there? Of course, are you working there as a white girl? Like that kind of stuff. I think that's why we're also so united. I had a Grab driver. I had a Grab driver.
I like this neighborhood. I think it's super nice. Really.
And whenever this Grab driver yesterday is like, oh, I just live up opposite your house, and isn't it a great area? And so we're always all proud, like, oh yeah, I'm Geylang too, East Side, and like I feel like more than I know people from the West or the South, there's such a unity here. And I mean, we're sitting here as a group of friends, and we have countless friends right around the corner still. But there's this unity where we, I think, appreciate our hood almost more, a little bit more than others, maybe because we have to defend it more often.
This feels like a neighborhood in, somebody that lives in CBD, they don't feel the neighborhood like a neighborhood.
Very true.
Which is why that a lot of conversations about
It's the same thing like
how
you chat.
Singapore is boring is simply based on opinions from people who live in the CBD. Whereas once you come to Geylang, you'd be like, whoa, there's a little too much soul here. Let's move back to the CBD.
No, it's okay. This, neighbors like this happens in a lot of other cities, not just in Asia. I was living in Madrid before, and I was living in a neighborhood that is people from everywhere just goes to this neighborhood. There's quite a lot of music scene as well, and some occupied places. It's people from everywhere, and just kind of like this type of neighborhood.
You seem to like living in this type of areas.
Maybe I feel attracted to this. I was originally from Spain, from a very small city, so I just want to go
in the happening areas.
I like when I open my window and I see life happening. It activates me. Yes, if I go back to my home in Spain, I open the window and you don't see anyone, or maybe like this old woman trying to walk on.
So no, it's also a great place.
Just close my window, go back to bed.
I mean, it's not just that there's life here and there's a lot happening. We have the food, but it's a good place. We're not too far from downtown. We're not too far from the airport. It's a good place overall.
It is.
Right?
It's very central considering where we are.
True.
Yeah.
One street to the center.
Yeah, to Kallang, to Bugis, it's really near.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying, Fifi, because like when we first moved to Geylang, I think I could really sense that my girlfriend's parents were more than a little concerned about the location. And so,
make sure you're not living in the shadier part of Geylang.
But then, of course, they also identified a lot of places where they go to hang out. Like, there's a lot of good places to eat here.
Yep.
And I remember, like, Selena's dad once commented that, this is like what Singapore used to be. And at the end of the day, this is essentially what Singapore was since, like, the 1800s. Right?
Yeah.
So this was like.
So I think that all this politics have gone a little bit too far, like politics of cleaning up to just to forgetting what Singapore was before.
Well, it depends, right? Like if we were
Like
living
people
in the
don't remember
1950s.
anymore. Even people that was living at that time,
Yeah.
they think like, wow, how come this still be here?
Well,
This
I
is
think
Singapore
one part
that I
of it
remember
is
in the
like
past.
this became a heritage district, so they kind of just made sure that there's not going to be any more development like what's happening in the CBD or anything. But to get to your point about cleaning up the neighborhoods, it was a product of its time, right? I'm guessing that in the 1950s, like it was so bad that they had to do a cleanup drive. And let's also remember that this is an opportunity for the homegrown political parties to say that, hey, we can do things better than the British.
We have a point.
We
We have a political point.
Yeah, so they're like,
But I think it's all also in this very Singaporean perspective. I remember a few months back, I love reading the Geylang news. Sometimes you get like these alerts, and there was a riot, and it was basically 7 or 8 people that were out in the street. And I was like, a riot, guys? A riot? Like this happening in Frankfurt, no one bat an eye. Like it's just a bunch of people getting drunk outside. Well, we got other stuff to do.
We call it, it's like playing cards.
Exactly. So this is
Getting
another
it louder.
thing. And I love this. I have this really dodgy area down there where every time I'm passing these guys that have their little table out, someone is passing someone money or something. I love it. I'm always like, the gangsters, But it's all in a perspective of Singapore. So it's not that bad. Period. It's very controlled. It's very okay. I don't think there's messed up shit happening everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think
Very
we can
under
feel
control,
very
yes.
safe. Yeah, it's very controlled.
I think it's because Singapore has such a clean image. So when you think about Geylang and having all these activities, it's like, oh no, that's bad. So
that
is-
dissonance is like, oh,
Yeah.
what? That's not
like
what I had in
Geylang
mind.
is horrible because of that. But like, it's normal. It's just, it's normal for a country, and for us to be able to just contain it in certain areas, I guess you would say it's pretty, it's quite impressive. But to a lot of Singaporeans, because you want to maintain that clean, and we are like a first world country and nothing bad goes on. So like Geylang is the only place that has all these shady activities, which is not true. It's just that somehow Geylang just gets this rap because now you have Yishun. So we are like, now we have Yishun. That's the thing. So it's like the new Geylang, maybe.
The new bad boy in town.
The new crazy town,
Money Nation.
Funny. I mean, sex in the end is nothing but love, right? So this is basically Geylang. Yeah. And I mean, then again, what is the crazy stuff that really happens here? I think
There are fights. There are fights here.
But mostly because of the drunk guys.
exactly.
Mostly because of
there
the
was a
drunk guys
stabbing
and,
recently and
but
stuff like
but
that.
Jasmine, let's face
Not-
it, like you
not
and I
that
are
crazy.
living in a fairly gentrified part of Geylang. Like Shankar is living in what is essentially the wild west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
I have a question for Shankar. Do you like get girls approaching you aggressively? Because I've had friends who walk by those lorongs and then they get girls aggressively pushing them to like against the walls
not
and
to
like
me,
grabbing
not to
them.
me.
Wow. Okay.
Not to me, not even when I just arrived to Geylang. They were telling me something sometime, but it's kind of like a little bit like broken English. So like, what?
But nothing extreme.
No, nothing extreme. Nothing extreme. I think that they're more used to. I'm not their type of client. So
I don't find it too aggressive anyway. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay, as a girl, obviously I have a different view on things, but I think the thing that I thought was most surprising is these table out where they sell all those sex drugs. And how they just there, and this is a legal business, but they just there, which is pretty funny. I think. But the thing is, people come here to get it. I don't think they have to be so aggressive.
Yeah,
This
no,
is
they
there.
are not.
You come here for that.
they are not. They are not.
They
No,
don't.
those
So like,
one.
what they do is, and I've actually seen this happen one time. So we're walking down the street, and then there's this guy. He had this like big table with all sorts of shit.
Yeah,
you know, like-
Viagra. Basically, just tell what is
all
it.
these
It's
pills
like
and all that
Viagra and
stuff,
everything.
right?
Just
Were they like
to-
shouting like
yeah.
for sale?
Well, I mean, they were being a little discreet about
Actually,
it.
these guys can be a little bit aggressive sometimes, and I feel like, like calling me old or what?
But the thing is that, like, when you see them
Cannot
pack
do
up
anymore.
and leave, they can do it so fucking quick.
Yes.
So there wasn't any police at the time, but for some reason, this guy decided to pack up, and he was like, "Boop, boop, boop, done."
Yeah.
Walks away.
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Damn, he's got that pat down," So
That happens more often than it looks. So usually there's these street sellers that just sell anything anything. I don't know, all the stuff and anything they can
Anything
find.
you need to open the asshole.
And yeah, no, I mean,
That's
this
the
is
kind of shit that they selling.
huh? No. I'm not talking
does
about
Jess
the pills.
know?
I'm not talking about the pills now. I'm talking
I
about.
was like touristy, looking at everything, trying to find out.
Sure, Jasmine, sure.
So yeah, sometimes there's police and just takes everything. Okay, goodbye. And close the business
They are.
at the pond.
They're preparing that. I've never seen anyone buy anything. Maybe we should just hang out there a little bit more and judge the people that buy something.
Okay.
I'm
yes.
sure, dude, like right outside your house, like that's where all the action is happening.
Yes, exactly. Really. They
So who
sell
are the
cigarette-
buyers?
Hmm?
Who are the buyers
For
of those pills?
what? The bills. I don't know. People that want to last all night, probably.
Yeah, I mean, we know that. But like,
Yeah, but are they
what
old
kind of
people? Are they, you know?
No, I don't think that it's necessarily old people. I think it's people that just want to last all night. Really.
I paid for it. You better stay up.
Exactly. Or they want to maybe just got drunk and cannot do anymore. So it's like, hey, let's try this. Maybe works.
Because I've seen like outside your house, like two people who are like selling, pills.
Yeah.
I haven't seen cigarettes outside your house.
Yes, there is some. There is this corner with the bank there. Yes.
Yeah. And then I see a couple of streetwalkers. In fact, one of the streetwalkers right outside the house, like she has a chair.
Mm-hmm.
She does a bit of walking all that, and she puts a chair right on the footpath, and she sits down there,
Oh yeah,
And
in
then she's
the
checking out her
yeah.
phone and stuff like that.
In the middle of nowhere.
She needs a break
No,
sometimes.
that's in
And I'm like,
no, there is a chair, but there's a parking. There's a parking lot, right? The parking lot, yes.
So outside the
right.
parking
So she
lot,
sits in the parking lot.
So it's like there's a parking lot, there's a footpath in the road.
Exactly, in the
and then she puts a
footpath.
chair on the road.
In the footpath,
On
in
footpath,
the
yeah.
in
And
front
that
of the
is not
parking lot.
strange.
Who
That
knows?
is
This
really
chair
not
can be
strange.
No, I mean that's like
I really enjoyed
that's
that
what I
part,
see
you know?
from my balcony anyway. So you see like I don't know, depending on the night, like 3, 4, and actually, man, they work so many hours. That's impressive.
She's dressed up so nice and all that, and then she decides to take out this nice red plastic chair and sits down. I'm like, yeah, man, she's come prepared.
Yeah.
Starting the business for the night.
yeah.
No, the chairs. I mean, they don't bring the chair. There's like some tree there, and they put it on beside the tree.
Oh, right. Okay.
They cover it with some plants. Nobody goes there anyway because of whatever, one chair.
Like, boop, magic chair.
Yes.
And then, okay, wow.
Yes.
So how many hours do they work?
Usually they start appearing around 6 p.m. And if we've been partying, I sometimes arrive back home and instead of going directly to the bed, maybe I watch something on YouTube or something, and you can still see them until 8 a.m. next day or
8
a bit
a.m.?
more. Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Well, then
that's,
I know who needs the pills.
I mean, it kind of like I've been living there for 3 years, and this is like a regular. So I kind of know, like, oh my god, this girl, yes, no, this has been here since yesterday at 6 p.m. or something.
So you walk back the street like, hey, what's up? How's it going, man?
Oh no, but sometimes I pass by and it's like, hey, hi.
Oh,
It's
like
in
you
the
guys,
neighborhood.
like, do you guys recognize each other?
Yeah, I mean, 3
Because if you
years
see
been
them
there.
sometimes or all the time.
That's right.
Shankar's-
Just pass by. It's
Shankar's
like
apartment is on the first floor. So whoever he
friends.
sees, he sees.
no,
they see them,
I
yeah.
have a balcony on the first floor, and yeah, I mean, I smoke quite a little bit, so yeah, pass some time on the balcony.
And then they
And,
look up and, hey, yo.
But anyway, I like to just go to this food court downstairs. So it's the same thing that I could say hi to the guy in the food cart.
Yeah.
I see
course,
him
it's your neighborhood.
like for 3 years. I've seen him so many times. Or the guy in the store downstairs that is selling the mobile phones. Okay, like, hey, how's the night? So it's like kind of like a different type of business. As long as they are not forced to something, okay. You
Let
guys
them
can do
live
whatever.
their life.
But yeah, I mean, for context, folks, streetwalkers in Singapore are technically illegal. Not technically, yeah, they're literally
They're
illegal.
literally illegal, yes. What is allowed is the houses.
Yes.
Correct.
So you have the lorongs, which have the brothels, which are called fish tanks.
Fish tanks.
Yeah, because they have glass panes. So
You better not be the smell.
Smells fishy.
Voila. I was not expecting that.
Sorry.
But yeah, fish. They're called fish tanks. Purely, from how it looks like.
Mm-hmm. You usually cannot see. You usually cannot see inside.
So you have to walk into these houses. So these are like these old shop houses, and they have like red lanterns. So it signifies that this is like a whorehouse. So you walk inside, and then you get to see, women sitting behind this glass pane. You take your pick.
You usually don't see any woman from outside.
Yeah, from the outside you don't.
Well, you see some guys that those are the ones that attract you.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, do you want to have some girl?
Yeah, so it's like you can walk down the street and you can like
you don't see any girl,
but they kind of discourage you from doing that. So a lot of people are like kind of shooed away if they try to take pictures.
Yeah.
So those are kind of regulated in a way. So all of the sex workers working in those houses, they have apparently a yellow card, which entitles them to sex work in Singapore, which is actually a great thing. Because personally, I believe that prostitution should be legalized simply because
they need protection.
Yes, and exploitation happens a lot in this industry. So legalization just kind of is a step in the right direction. So a lot of the sex workers, they have this yellow card, and they have to check themselves every month. So if you want to go for those whorehouses, you can be assured to have safe sex.
But can I ask a question? When I moved to Singapore, to Geylang, I had a lot of people telling me, I think 24 plus, and I think I told you the same because that's where it's not going to be so noisy. I had friends that lived in like 18 and 20 and 22, and no one really was too bothered by the activities going down there, but the issue was more that it's really noisy, like smashing glasses, dogs barking and stuff like this. Is that something that you have?
It's noisy. Well, the first thing that is noisy is the road itself. Yeah. That's the first noisy thing. Because it's a kind of like a very, there's a lot of traffic on that road. And people, when they drive, when the traffic light opens, it's just, wow, they go fast. So that's the most noisy thing that I can hear.
Not so much the happening.
There is some happening sometime, but it's not as common as the traffic is just like background noise continuously. Sometimes there are things, there are some people just talking loud, even if they're not angry. There is people that just get angry. They can be young, old. I remember even this year during Chinese New Year, there was a fight by two 70-year-old men over some playing cards. I passed by in my way to supermarket. I saw them there. They were drinking and playing cards, and they were talking loud. And then when I go back, I see them one was fighting the other. Oh my God, you guys are not already.
70-year-old Chinese man?
Was that the guy that then went into the store and actually bought a saw to cut the guy?
What?
Wait, what?
That was a few months back, and I think it was two older people.
Oh yeah, maybe, I don't know.
He went back to the store.
Oh no!
Wait,
no! I think that this was
the dude
different anyway. But
decided to go to the supermarket, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, let me just take the time to buy a saw."
Just one.
He told the other guy, "Just give me 2 minutes."
Give me the advantages of these two saws.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little absurd. Yeah, there are fights, but sometimes it's just I don't know, man.
It was happening though.
Wow. Okay.
The problem with Geylang is that fights are very, very show off.
Very drunk.
No, show off. In any other city, fights could happen all the time in a neighborhood like this. Way more. Here it just happens. Every time that it happens, there is two guys fighting and 250 people looking at it. Then 6
you're right.
police cars come. They ask what happened. They start interrogating. The thing lasts basically 2-3 hours. Meanwhile, they try to remove the people that is watching. More people comes. The traffic stops. The next day it appears on the newspapers. So things that would happen. Okay, two guys fight. Bye. Boom. Goodbye. Tomorrow. In Singapore, it just gets out of proportion so fast.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's not often that you see an actual physical altercation here in Singapore, right?
The
thing is, they are not too
down the
serious.
Well, I mean, I kind of like it, right? Because it's like, so when you go to a bar, you can be assured that no matter what happens, you will not, go back home with a black eye.
Yeah,
I think that's such a it's such a relief for me, that I can go out and not have to deal with that.
Yeah, but the fights, like the ones that you see aren't like that bad, right? When I
I've
mean
seen
that, it's not like serious ones where like someone dies.
No, I haven't seen anyone die.
Yeah,
Thanks
I
God.
mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, even though these happens, these things happen, but like they're not on a super serious level. It's just that because we don't have much news to cover.
Yeah, exactly.
We just cover any fight that happens.
I think that all these things get out of proportion because of that. There are not that many news. So every time there is one fight, that appears in the news, and it's sensational, and everyone is talking about it and thinking that it's way bigger than it's actually happening in comparison with other cities of this size.
Yeah.
I'm
we have to
imagining
put that
they
in
sit in
proportion.
the newsroom. They'd be like, we don't have anything happening in Geylang?
Yeah, can you fight,
Welcome
guys?
to all people fighting over their coffee. Anything happening down
That was
there?
over
We still
playing
got a
cards,
page to
really,
fill.
during Chinese New
Big up
Year.
news on Geylang right now.
Chinese
Where
New
do you
Year.
get your Geylang news? You mentioned that you were.
I don't know. It comes up at Facebook or whatever.
Right,
just
okay.
stuff that, yeah.
Breaking news.
Yes.
Just
Old man
search
buys
on
a saw.
Google.
That was a great story.
Wow. Okay.
The craziest. I was telling Rindo about this time. I was at home in the I wanted to go out to the balcony. I think I didn't go out that night or just arrived. That was surprising. And go out to have a cigarette, open the curtains and see basically 200 people looking at me. So I was a bit. I put my shirt quite fast, just in case it was that. Then I was like making some gestures like, what? So supposedly there was some couple problems in the floor just on top of me. And like some, the descriptions that we're saying, there's that the girl wanted to jump. I don't know. I went downstairs, opened the police because you need a fingerprint to open my place. So go there. And I don't know. The police just fixed whatever. Nothing happened in the end. That's one crazy story. There are sometimes some guys that get a little bit too drunk and start going there in the middle of the street, trying to stop the cars or maybe kick them. The cars try to...
Kick them back.
The cars try to avoid. So, yes. Funny thing is that then this guy tried to kick one taxi, and then when it stopped, he tried to get the taxi. So,
Was that how they fly taxi?
Yes.
Bam!
Can't use my hands to flag, so I will kick it.
Anyway, there's basically just a guy goes back to the walk path, lays down there for a while. Police comes, like 6 police cars. So
There's always so many, right? That
police
is so
cars?
funny.
6 police cars.
For one guy?
Yes, for one guy that is basically sleeping on the walk path.
Wait, so this guy, he kicked the taxi.
No,
and
no,
then
no.
he decided to
This
sleep
is
on.
a different guy.
Oh, different guy.
No,
Okay.
actually the same. He tried to get the taxi. Taxi said, what? Why? The taxi got a bit like pissed off.
Okay.
Went there back to the walk path. He's like, okay, I'm going to sleep there. in this case, okay, no problem.
I live here now.
No, there's other crazy stories, but they're just like even like crazy conversations that just happen. I like to go downstairs. The bar that like this serious Cheers, where everybody knows you. I know that I'm always going to be the ammo there anyway, but they know me, and I know quite a lot of people that is regulars there. This night, I remember there was this old Singaporean guy, all complete with a lot of tattoos. And the story was getting crazier and crazier. He was just telling like so he was working like Yakuza in Japan. He was part of the mafia in Singapore. He stabbed one policeman in Singapore. He served 20 years in prison. He had $8 million in the bank because he was smuggling people into the States.
Damn.
So yeah, conversation was getting crazy and
It's
crazy.
global.
He was inviting to all the beers. I was just like, okay, I don't know how to take this. This is quite an interesting story, at least.
Wow. Okay. And I mean, is he out of that gangster life?
Well, I don't know. He was like 70
Okay.
at this point. So yeah, I suppose so. After 20 years in prison, I suppose so.
You don't choose the gangs alive. It chooses you.
To be honest, my time in Geylang, at least in Geylang Serai, has been very peaceful. I get more positive experiences than anything else. Usually the negative stories I hear,
From Shankar.
yeah, from Shankar. I mean, those are just stories.
The point is that I have never got involved literally in these
Disclaimer.
things
Yeah.
anyway. So
Oh, just a disclaimer.
You're not
Okay.
being
All right.
judged.
it's some
You're
things that you
just-
see. It's like
I
kind of
see. I'm not involved.
it's kind of like when you go to Sentosa and you see things, right? So you go here
Sightseeing.
and it's like sightseeing.
Yeah, but
That happens.
But for me, the experiences I have are all usually in Geylang Serai area. If not, like I will come to Geylang for food, to this part of Geylang for food. But at Geylang Serai, usually like when there's like a crowd, it's because of like the Geylang Serai Bazaar. Like we have every Hari Raya, so it gets really crowded. You have all this food, this festival vibe. It's really nice to see people coming from everywhere around the island just for the bazaar.
Yeah.
Finally, it gives Geylang Serai like the great impression that people have. So every Hari Raya, people will say like, "Oh, let's go to the Geylang Bazaar."
Yeah. And I love going there because it's
Yeah.
like during the bazaar time, it's like you just go down there and there's all sorts of like food that's available and it's fantastic. And it's not just food, right? You have all these games that you play, and
Yep.
I think there's a very festive carnival spirit that goes on.
Yeah, and
it's pretty good.
it paints Geylang in a different light.
All the family as well.
Yeah, it's such a family place. It's a place where you gather and you don't talk about like the negative part about Geylang. So for once, like the red light district area is forgotten. So when you mention like I'm going to Geylang during the Hari Raya period, people know that you're going there for the bazaar.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that part still stands out for me. If I've stayed there for a really long time and I've seen how like the Geylang bazaars evolved over time. Of course, it gets less traditional. It's a lot more modern with like funky fusion food. But still, the positive thing, it's still there. It's, and the vibe is still there. I still love being around that area because I can literally just walk to the bazaar. So for me, every year is one thing that I always look forward to.
It's actually a really lovely neighborhood. I really love being here. I can not count on both my hands the amount of people I can walk to. That's how close my friends are. Here, that is great. Or just get in a cab and make it a little bit more down east and all that. So I think it's a great place to grow up. I didn't even grow up here, but I really like Geylang for that.
It is.
And I think it still is. I see people from all over. I mean, yes, sometimes when I go to the food court, you still get this, oh, you know how to use an Asian spoon? Like, yeah, God damn it, I'm 30
chopsticks,
years old. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But I get that wherever I would go. And then I would tell people I live here for more than 5 years. So I think that's everywhere. I only have that when I'm in my condo, and I often go on Saturdays in the morning to go swimming and tanning. And there's this our, I don't know, property manager, I don't know what you call it, and he would come and he always thinks I'm the other white girl. So there's this other white girl that lives in a condo, and every time he talks to me, we're continuing a conversation that I didn't have.
Hey,
So I'm
Lauren, so
always
what's
like-
up?
White girls all look the same.
I know, we do, and that's just what it is.
I didn't say it.
I'm just always like, yeah, sure. And he's like, did you go home last week? And I'm like,
What?
no, I'm going next week. And he's super surprised, but it's actually the reality. I'm going next week. So
And the other girl is like, who the fuck is this other white girl?
I think we met once. We were just smiling at each other and said hi, and I felt we both were like, "You're that other conversation, right? You hold the other part."
You need to synchronize a bit. What are we going to say next
And
time?
actually exchange
You guys
number.
need to speak to
Yeah.
that person like at the same time and make him realize.
That would blow his fucking mind. He's like, what?
Oh.
Cannot compute.
But still, it's very sweet, right? He's always very eager to have a conversation and ask where I'm from. I don't know where the other one is from. It must blow his mind that, you know, we come from different countries. But yeah, I really have mainly really good. If I think of anything memorable or great memories, it's all fun stuff with friends. It's mainly that, and even those little dodgy moments. Every time I go to that little food street downstairs, and these guys are exchanging whatever illegal shit they're exchanging. I like it. It has a little bit soul to it. It doesn't feel too clean. I like my neighborhood.
Like
so it's
buying
it's
cigarettes or something like that, maybe. Yeah.
It's probably stuff like this. I still have to figure out if it's something else.
I think it's living with that fact that these things do happen, but a lot of Singaporeans just, you know, when they live their life, they don't really see that part.
Yeah.
Don't get exposed to it.
Yeah, they're not exposed to it. So to them, like anything that is, you know, is bad. But for us, when we see it happening so often, we just live our life.
Yeah, we just
it doesn't
shrug and
affect
say, hey,
us.
what happens? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of like part of...
Yeah, it's not like someone is stabbing another person in front of you, that kind of bad. It's just all this small illegal stuff that you
And
can
nothing
ignore.
will happen to you. You
Yeah.
know this happens next to you.
Exactly.
But Geylang offers everything. Like, it's a
Yep.
great location to go anywhere to. Have good food, a lot of friends here, great apartments. I'm just gonna say it. I have a lot of people that I make move here, like you. I recommended Rindo to live here
I moved it.
because I think they have great apartment for good prices and a great
And
location.
very
that I didn't
location, very
find
good
like
location,
that.
yeah.
Exactly, that I didn't find like this. If I were to be at Lavender or anywhere else, I would pay much more for anything like that.
Geylang is just fucking fantastic. Like, I love food, and you know, I just walk down the street and there's like awesome food places here in Geylang. Like right down the street, there's the Ban Mian place. Have you tried that out, Jasmine?
Yes, sir.
It's just fantastic. If you walk down the street, there's this eminent frog porridge place that I really love. It's slightly pricey, but I love frog porridge, so that's really good. And like everything in general, just walk down any
Everything,
place, it's just
yeah.
glorious.
That just reminds me of my first Geylang experience that I wasn't aware that I was having. I was 21 years old. It came here the first time. I was an intern, and I had this colleague of mine who was German as well, lived in Singapore for the past 10 plus years, PR. All his friends were locals, and I said, I need a Singaporean experience. My first time in Asia, give me a Singaporean or / Asian experience. So he took me to Geylang, and we had frog porridge that first. Then later we went for karaoke, and then back to Geylang. Karaoke, I think, was in Chinatown, and then back to Geylang for Thai disco.
Okay.
A dodgy ass Thai disco. I was definitely the only woman who was not working in this establishment. Super confused. The girls on the stage, we had like a cowgirl, a secretary, a nurse.
Like what is happening?
cop.
How this works?
All these Thai
The
girls.
Thai version of YMCA, you know? It's
That's what it was. They were all dancing and kind of singing, and then they would had these Hawaiian flower chains that were put around people's necks. The guys were shit wasted. We were on our, I don't know how many towers. And I was just like, can someone explain to me what is going on? And why would they put like the flowers over their heads and stuff like this? I thought it was crazy confusing. It was a really amazing night of being thrown into a culture that I was so new to, because I only spent my first weeks in Singapore. And just to say that in this Asian / Singaporean night that was offered to me by my friends, they chose out of 3 locations twice, Geylang.
Have you been to Thai discos before, right?
Oh man, yes.
Yeah.
So when people here go to those places, like they receive attention from some pretty girls that maybe they don't receive attention, I don't know, in a regular setting. So maybe
In real life, let's face it.
in a regular
The thing
setting,
is-
yeah.
And I mean, it kind of, there's like
but-
a whole other
So people
conversation.
get really hooked into it because
Yeah.
this is like,
It's like receiving
Wow.
receiving
No,
attention. Sometimes I find it quite why, because of these people like giving there like 100 and more. Then the girl goes there, drinks your beer,
Yeah, I mean,
and then they leave.
Shaco doesn't fuck with that. Did you just drink my beer? I'm out.
Sorry.
Love it.
What's the point?
To be fair, like I sympathize, because it's like if somebody's super nice to me, it's like, oh man, I just want to hang out with this person.
You want to tell your story? Did you tell that story in
No,
your
I
podcast?
never have, actually.
It's time. This is such a podcast about prostitution somehow. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to hear the beautiful story of Rindo becoming a close friend with a prostitute.
What?
So this was like my first time in Orchard Towers.
Yeah.
So it was maybe like 2014 or something. I was 2 years in Singapore at the time. And this was after a work party. We end up at Orchard Towers. I'm hanging out. My colleagues, they're, this is like the first time, going outside without their families. So they're like, this is the time of their lives, And I was just hanging out there. And then I ended up talking to this girl right next to me. And, so we started chatting and all that. And then the conversation gets very interesting. Like, I know it's as cliched as fuck, but it was actually a pretty interesting conversation. So we're like, okay, it's going on. That's all good. And like towards the end of the night, I think, the conversation got so engaging. And then we started like hanging out. We started like, having a lot more drinks and all that stuff. And then it got to the point where I was like, oh, fuck, wait, is this happening? Is this happening? Because I was getting signs that, she was down to maybe move the party somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, shit. Well,
I'm the man tonight. I got
like,
it.
What's going on? This has never happened before, but clearly I'm nailing this.
Clearly.
So we're drinking and all that, and then it gets to a point where she goes, let's, how about, we get out of here. And I was like, fuck yeah.
Wow.
And then I decided to, just go to the toilet, just clean my shit up.
Mm-hmm.
I walk to the toilet, I trip and I fall and I start puking all over my shit.
Oh my. Wow.
And but I'm like, fuck, no, but this is a girl waiting for me, like I'm clearly getting some tonight.
I trip, I fall, and I puke. Like, what scene is that?
So there's all this crap in my shirt and all that, and I'm like, but I can't, I don't want to give up at this point, right? So I go inside the toilet, I take my shirt off, and there's nothing else that I could do. So I take my shirt off and I just dunk it into the toilet.
Oh my!
I start like washing it, just to. Oh my! Okay, at this point I was like very, very drunk, but at the same time,
yes,
like,
I can imagine.
My second brain was talking. So I started dunking this shirt.
There was only the toilet. There was nothing else to wash.
Yeah, but then I put my shirt back on, but then I was like soaked. I was drunk. I got out of the toilet. I still stunk, and I was like, yeah, fuck this shit. I can't deal with this. So I walk out and I decide to call it a night. And I go back to the girl thinking that I should tell her that I should go. I don't know all that, and she's disappeared. And then I see her like with someone else, and I was like,
well. Okay.
And I go back home, and then
you were really close. Didn't she show you like pictures of her daughter and stuff?
So
it was an intense.
Yeah, it was a really, really great moment. So it's like she was just talking about her family, and then she was showing her life back home.
Yeah.
See, now that I think about it, I don't remember. It was either Ukraine or I'm not sure which country she was from.
Ukraine.
But, yeah.
From what I remember.
Yeah. And then she's showing her family, like she was showing her daughter, she was showing her dog, and I was like, oh,
wow.
clearly,
there's connection here. I know the dog already.
Yeah, but then managed to bail out of that. I mean, not managed to. I bailed out because
I think that's
she would have asked you to pay at the end of the night. What would you have done?
Yeah, but the thing was, then when I checked my credit card statement the next day, like boom, $500.
The beer.
Yeah.
It was expensive one.
Yeah, and that was the thing, right? Like, I do recall that we just had a couple of beers and all that, but yeah. It was just,
her beer was an expensive one. Ladies drink.
Yeah. And I was like, well, fuck.
But I love that when you told me the story, you were like so innocent, like, oh, we really connected. She showed me all these pictures and all that stuff. I'm like, girl, that is... You find everything of Singapore in Geylang.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You have all the great food. You have all the different types of people, races, where they come from. You have your red light district and your dodgy
with the Ferraris on the door.
Exactly. You have the fancy ass condos and all the expensive shit, like in PLQ, and I'll see a lot of business stuff popping up too, which is right around the corner. So Geylang's like a mini reflection of Singapore with a big part of history, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Actually, funny enough, I just did a few weeks ago. Shout out to Jente, who's moving here in January. Someone who I used to work with in Europe from the Belgium office. And she asked me, and I immediately said, you moved down here. For someone in my age, probably looking for something very similar, I make it very much about the location. Hey, this is a great place where you're not too far off from where you're going to work and where you're going to party, but at the same time, you have your neighborhood feeling. I think that's what I usually say. Because I prefer living in a neighborhood and not just,
Yeah, I agree.
you know,
Mostly,
And I think-
an orchard or something. Like, just, yeah.
yeah, it's mostly the same thing. It could be like very neighborhood. It's maybe similar to Chat as well in some aspects. It's not as sanitized like like some condos in the middle of nothing. You have everything here. You have nice food. Location is very nice. If you live or work in the CBD, it's just perfect.
Yeah, you live in Singapore. It's not like you live somewhere in a fancy ass condo.
Yeah.
Novena has these very
Yes.
expat areas, for example, where you kind of forget that you're in Singapore because you get everything catered to your expat life.
Yeah, and that's the people that later on they say, "Oh, but Singapore is so boring." Yeah, man, what
Exactly.
the hell? You're isolated of everything. You're just with your
speaks more
swimming
about
pool.
what you chose.
What do you want?
Than where
What do
you
you
are,
want?
yeah.
They're not experiencing anything here.
And that's it for now, folks. There's lots more to talk about Geylang, but for now, let's leave it at that. And you can definitely look forward to more stories and episodes, so stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe to Living It Up in Lion City on your favorite podcast app and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you like, you can rate the podcast and review it on Apple Podcasts and let me know what you think about it. And so, until the next episode, my name is Rindo, and you were listening to Living It Up in Lion City.